Hi there and welcome to my white fur in pastel video. Today's subject is a giant panda and the materials I'll be using are a mixture of soft pastels and pastel pencils. The paper I'm using is Clairefontaine Pastelmat. All materials will be listed below in the video description. This video follows on from my last video, black fur in pastel, and I'll have a pop-up card if this is something you'd like to watch. As you can see, the initial sketch and bouquet background have been applied. I'll put another pop-up card as I have a video especially for bouquet backgrounds in pastel if this is something you'd like to do for yourself. First of all, I've applied a layer of pan pastel white to the area where I'm now applying more detailed work. This is a Carbothello white pastel pencil. I don't want to apply too much detail to this area as this area is going to be slightly out of focus. I've also not gone into too much description regarding the ears because that is simply a rusty brown colour pan pastel applied first and then black over the top just to give it a bit of depth and a bit of warmth. And as I said, the video black fur in pastel covers this part of the subject much more. So if you'd like to take a look at that later, please feel free. The black fur in pastel video was requested, and this is a sort of automatic follow-on, I guess, with white fur in pastel. Okay, and off we go. So now we're using a grey, and this is a warm grey. I've laid it on its side so I'm not applying too much pressure, and I'm just gently glazing an area. And as I glaze the area and gently pad it down with my finger, it slightly tints the white and some of the pigment falls between the white lines just to give it a little bit of added depth. But as I said, not too much detail in that area. Now I'm just beginning to add dark brown to the panda's eye patch. Now I'm not going all piratey on you, it's just I meant the marking surrounding the panda's eye. Yeah, only I find my humour funny, sorry about that. Now I'm adding lamp black. Now lamp black has got a touch of blue in it. So if you're after a cool looking black, then lamp black is the way to go. If you want a more neutral black, then obviously go with neutral black, and that's like a jet black. But this was my preferred one just for that small area. Now this one I'm using is a jet black, and this is the black by Caran. Very soft pastel pencil. When you see me touch the pastel with my fingertips, I'm not trying to move anything out of the way, I'm not trying to smudge anything as such, just padding it down just to soften the effect. A little bit more white going on in that area. As I said, not too much detail, not too picky, because that will be slightly out of focus once the subject's completed. I'll just apologise now that this video is running at just under 1 hour 24 minutes, so it is a long video. Yeah, the reason being I'm using a new video editing suite, so I've not got it all sussed yet, so please bear with me. Okay, so just applying some more pan pastel, and this is the start of building up a tonal map of the subject. This is a medium grey, light to medium grey, and I'm applying it with a soft tool. These tools, the plastic part, come in different sizes, different shapes, and then you buy the foam applicators that you just pop on the end. So you only need to buy the plastic applicator once, and then the little foam tips are removable, replaceable, they're washable, so you can use them more than once. And really it's a case of you use them until they wear out. So you can use them, wash them, dry them, pop them back on. Repeat that over and over again until they become frayed, because obviously they're working on paper that has got a tooth. So they're going to wear out eventually, but they do last a long time. Now the reason I'm using the pan pastels, which is a soft pastel in a tub, each colour comes in a separate tub, is I'm working on Clairefontaine Pastelmat. When I work on velour paper, it's got a deeper tooth, and so I tend to use just a normal soft pastel and then apply the pastel pencil on top of that. But because I'm using the Clairefontaine pastel mat, it has less tooth, which for me personally means I can apply less layers. So I want those layers to be thinner if I want to apply the same amount of layers. Hence I'm using the pan pastel and the soft tool, so I still get the same amount of pigment, but I don't have to have the layers quite so thick. That's the reason I'm using the pan pastels. It's because I'm using the Clairefontaine pastel mat. But I must admit, the pan pastels are lovely to work with. The pigment is very strong, so you need a very small amount. So I'm really enjoying experimenting with them and playing with them, and it's up to now it's been a good experience so far. Okay, so as I said, there is a video, black fur in pastel, that will take you into more depth how to create black fur. This is white fur in pastel. Same thing applies to all of my pastel paintings. I create a tonal base coat. It's like a map. It maps out the structure of the subject underneath the fur or the feathers or the scales or whatever subject I'm working on. I'm just adding some flesh tone up at the top. A little bit more. And it's just a case. I should have speeded this part of the video up, but we'll just leave it as it is now. Now it's running. And I am leaning very gently on the painting at the moment, but as you'll see later on, I do resort to using a mole stick to rest my hand on. And what a mole stick is, it's normally comes in two parts made of metal, although you can buy ones that are made out of wood, or you could even make one yourself. It rests across your painting, slightly above your painting, but diagonally or horizontally or vertically across your painting. One end is bare and the other end has got normally a cork ball on the end covered with either suede or some material that you can rest against your painting. I prefer to actually hook mine onto the top of the board or the top of the canvas if I'm working in paint. And then you hold the other end of the stick with your other hand, and then you can rest your painting hand, drawing hand on the pole itself instead of resting against your actual artwork. That's what a mole stick is, and I'll pop them in the description below. So just building up a little bit more base coat here. I do have my next project on the easel. It's a leopard face in pastel, again on Clairefontaine pastel mat, but I'm concentrating on eyes on that one. So you will zoom in on the eye of the panda excuse me, and see it done a little bit more close up, but it's a very small eye. Whereas the leopard one that's on my easel at the moment, you'll see more in depth of how I do create eyes in pastel. I can't work on it at the moment as I've damaged a muscle in my shoulder. For those of you who like medical things, the name of it is a supraspinatus muscle. It's one of the rotator cuff muscles. And it means the top part of my arm is pretty immobile at the minute, and I'm just waiting for my physio to start. I'm in less pain than I was, so it's on the mend already, hopefully, so shouldn't be too long before I'm back at the easel properly. I can work with my artwork on my lap at the moment, but that's no good for filming. I need to be able to get back up at the easel to finish off filming the video. So it should be, hopefully I should be able to do it in small spurts within the next week or so. Once my shoulder's settled down, it's an ongoing problem from having worked for years at an easel, I guess, but there you go. Okay, adding more of this medium. It's quite a light grey, but it is in the medium range, so mid to light grey, but not too light. The reason I only go on with my mid-tones at the moment on the undercoat is if I were to add highlights at this stage and then I go to add my detail later and the details just happen to be highlighted, I can't go any lighter because I've already applied my lights. And the same goes with shaded areas. So if I were to add shaded areas here in the base coat, when I come to put my details on in the shaded areas, I wouldn't be able to go any darker. So hence the whole tonal map that I'm creating now with the soft pastels all remains in sort of mid-tone range. As you'll see, I will be putting some shadowed areas in, but not really dark, just sort of medium dark, as it were. So just building up a little bit more. As I said, this is a long video. It's 1 hour 24, roughly 1 hour 24 minutes. I mean, if this is something that you'd like to see, if you'd like to see this sort of time length videos, then please let me know in the comments below. Or if you prefer shorter videos, then let me know that too. I personally like the longer videos. If I'm working in my studio, it's nice to have some longer videos on playing in the background. I don't know if you do the same thing while you're creating, but yeah, I quite like it. Okay, here we are. We're just using a slightly darker pan pastel now. As I said, you don't have to use pan pastels. This can be achieved just by using your normal soft pastel sticks. It could even be achieved using pastel pencils, but it'd take a long time. It'd be a very long process if you only have pastel pencils to work with. When starting people off in pastels, I do recommend that they get the block pastels first, because a lot of things can be achieved. You can create a whole painting just using the block pastels, and it doesn't take very long. So beginners get to see results fairly quickly. They can do landscapes, seascapes, and even animals and human portraits just using soft pastels. You won't get the same amount of detail, but you're able to play with contrast and colour and form very easily. Then next on the shopping list would be pastel pencils. If money's no object, then I'd say Caran dash, but they're one of the most expensive ones. So mostly people would opt for something like Carbothello, which is a very good pencil, and it's a pencil that I use for teaching. I use the Carbothello when I'm running workshops, and also partly when I'm demonstrating, along with the Caran dash. Other pencils that I use are Derwent and Fabre Castell and Conte. So all different ones. As long as the light fast rating is good, then I'll use it. Just building up a little bit of a shadowed area under the ear, and running down towards the body of the panda, which is going to be dark, very dark, quite a bit of black used in the body area. If you see a pause in the video at any time, it's probably because I'm doing one of three things. I'm either looking at the reference image, which is over to my left, or I'm picking up some art materials from my right, and sometimes having to source out a colour that I haven't got right next to me, so I might just pop and get one from the drawer behind me, or I'm sipping up my coffee while I work. I'm just going to have a drink now because it's a long video and I need some liquid refreshments. So there we go, we're starting on the bodied area. As I said, no detail in this area. I'm not going to go into too much depth regarding this. It's not too much information because, as I said, there's a whole video devoted just to black foam pastel. I do apologise if I'm like just now when I'm working behind that watermark, but I was advised when I set up my video channel to have the bar running down the left hand side with my name and what I do, and to have watermark on the bottom right hand side for obvious reasons. Just videos do go astray, they do get shall we say illegally borrowed off YouTube, and they can appear on other channels with other people claiming the rights over videos and things. And so my friend just told me to make sure that I'd taken these 2 steps to ensure that didn't happen to mine. So that's why it's there. So I apologise for that. So there's 3 things to apologise for that I can think of straight away, and that's video length, because it is a long video, longer than normal, working behind a watermark, and as you'll no doubt guess that, well, and yeah, another couple of things, I do waffle, so I'll apologise now about the waffle, and my hair occasionally just floats into view and back out again. And I had actually got it tied back that day while videoing this as well, but it still sort of broke free and tried to make its claim for fame by photo bombing. Back to the panda. So we've just applied some dark brown. We're now applying a little bit of black over the top. This voiceover is my 5th attempt, I think. The other 4 attempts have gone wrong and it's not synced properly with the video, so I'm just hoping that this one syncs properly now. It's because I'm using a new video editing suite, I believe, because I can't think there's anything wrong with anything else. And hopefully the new microphone's making a difference for you guys. I hope the audio quality is better, because it was a bit crackly before when I was using just the inbuilt microphone in my MacBook. But I'm not using my MacBook anymore. My husband's actually bought me a Dell Inspiron PC, and so all the software, the new software, is running through the tower, and the mic's plugged into the tower as well, so it's a whole new setup. So let's hope this helps me to produce more videos more often. I'll take a moment just to say thank you to my 450 subscribers. You are absolutely wonderful. Your feedback and comments are brilliant. Love you all, and it's just really encouraging that you're enjoying my videos, that I'm able to help you when you ask questions, and I look forward to making more for you. If you have any subjects that you'd like to see, or any mediums that you'd like me to work in, just drop a comment in one of the boxes below and I'll put it on my to-do list. Questions. Lady asked me a question at the end of... Okay, just pause there. Just going in with the red oxide. That's the same red oxide that I used underneath the fur on the body and on the ears. I'm just filling in quite quickly the patch around, the marking around the panda's eye. So we're going to go in red oxide, some dark brown, and then black on top. Keeping in mind not to go over the guidelines, because we don't want that shape to go out of shape, as it were. We don't want to make it any wider than it should be, or any longer than it should be, or misshape. And so when you're working in soft pastels, just keep in mind where your guidelines are, even if they're no longer viewable. Just keep those restrictions in mind. Yeah, a lady messaged me on one of the previous videos and said, would it be alright, she'd done a pastel painting she didn't like, would it be okay to spray it with fixative and then work over it afresh? I did reply straight away. My reply was, well, to start off, if you've created a painting, this is how I'd think about it if it was me. If I'd created a painting and I didn't want to go on with it any longer, I completely wanted to stop and start afresh, I'd ask myself why. Was it because I'd made a mistake on the initial drawing? In which case, yes, I should have picked that up earlier on in the painting process. Or is it a case that it just looks ugly? It's at the ugly stage, and all paintings go through the ugly stage. As you'll all know, if you create works of art, they all go through ugly stages, and sometimes it might just be because it's not finished, it doesn't look right, so you just need to carry on. Just add a few more layers, add a little bit more colour, take a breather, have a coffee, come back to it the following day, look at it with fresh eyes, and just see if there's something that you can do to make it look better, to sort of inspire you to carry on with it. If I did get to the point where I didn't want to carry on with a piece for some reason, I would reach for a new piece of paper. I actually wouldn't spray with a fixative and try and start afresh. If this isn't the case, if this is something you're unable to do because of finances, or you can't get hold of a certain product, then what I do suggest is a couple of things depending upon the paper you're using. If you're working your pastel on velour, what I advise you to do is get your hoover nozzle, put a soft furnishings attachment on the end, put your hoover settings on low, and then just gently hoover the pastel from the velour. Keep in mind that if you've used any vibrant colours or very dark colours, that the paper's likely to be stained, and you won't be able to remove that by hoovering, but you will remove a good percentage of the soft pastel, and then that will allow you to start afresh. The same goes for paper such as this, Clairefontaine or Mine Tints or a sanded paper, but this time I'd still have the hoover nozzle at the ready, but I'd use a stiff-haired, clean, dry brush, something like a hog hair brush that you'd use for oil painting. Gently brush the pastel to one side towards the hoover nozzle and carry on doing that until the paper's clear of pastel. Again, vibrant colours and dark colours will have probably stained the paper, but at least you'll be able to start afresh. Another reason, or a couple of reasons, that I wouldn't just spray a piece of paper with a fixative and start afresh is if you've applied 6 or 7 or 4 whatever layers already to your paper, and then you want to start afresh, well, that's 6, 7 or 4 or 8 or whatever amount of layers already taken up in the tooth of your paper, which means you'll be struggling then to apply the amount of layers required for your piece of work. Another thing is if you'd already applied, say, some vibrant reds, and then you sprayed it and wanted to start afresh but decided you wanted to work in green, those underlaying reds will alter the colour of the green. They'll have a detrimental effect on the green you're adding, so sort of red and green make brown, as we know. So your green, if you go on to the top of a vibrant red, even if it's been fixed, it will affect the colour of your green. It's more likely to look dulled and muddied. So there's a few reasons there. But if in doubt, just try it out and you've got nothing to lose. Okay, onto the eye. Now I've gone around with the black, just making sure that I'm picking out all those guidelines, that the eye is the correct shape, that it's in the right place. Because obviously, as we were saying, guidelines can be lost underneath layers of soft pastel. And as I said, we're not going to go into too much detail in this eye because we're going to be looking at eyes in more detail in the next video that I'm filming at the moment. Going in with the red oxide. Now this is the same colour but in a pencil. This is a Caran pastel pencil. As this is the same colour that we've used underneath the black fur on the marking around the eye and on the body and on the ears. So just keeping that continuity of colour throughout the painting. I also add that the pink that is used in the white of the eye is the same pink that was used in the background, just to keep the colours flowing throughout the painting. A little bit of grey to darken down that highlight. We don't want it too bright. And by adding some shadow onto the left hand side of the eye, it just makes it look a lot rounder, makes it look more ball-like instead of flat. A little bit of sepia going on to soften the black running down the right hand side of the iris, and a little bit of black to increase the shadowed area of the eye on the left. Again, patting it down with my finger, not trying to remove anything, just softening things, and back round underneath the eyelid with the black. Just bringing a little bit of black down there just for a little bit of shadowing. Obviously the eyelid would create a shadow at the top, a little bit more pink. A pink that again has been used in the background. Whatever images I work on, whatever projects I work on, I do try and integrate the background or the foreground or both into my subject colour, and this way it marries the whole painting together. It makes you believe that then the 2 things or 3 things or 4 things are meant to be together. By adding the colour of the surroundings onto the subject, it just brings a wholeness, I believe. Well, for me personally, that's how I see it. A little bit of a lighter red going on there, and an orangey brown. I don't remember all the numbers of the colours, and really I just reach for, closest will do. So whichever's closest to what I need, it'll work. As long as the colours are working together, it doesn't matter if they're slightly different to what's in your reference image. Obviously, unless you're working on a pet portrait commission, in which case clients tend to know their animals like the back of their hands, and you need to get, as well as detail, you need to get coloration right as well. But obviously reflections in eyes are going to reflect their surroundings, and in this case this panda has pink surroundings. Inspiration for the background came from, I went out for a walk with my camera, and those of you who know me well will know my camera's called Jerry, after Gerald Durrell, the conservationist. I went for a walk, took my camera along and saw some cherry trees in blossom. I took some photographs of the cherry blossom, adjusted my aperture so that the photographs would be out of focus. That is what I wanted. Brought the photographs home, had a look at them and decided that it'd look really nice as a background for a panda. So you'd see, just, you don't know where you're going to get inspiration from. You just, yeah, comes the oddest moments sometimes. But that was my inspiration for the background for the panda. So just lightly feathering around the edges there. Again, keeping in mind those underlying guidelines. I keep looking at my reference image to make sure everything's going in the right direction. And as we build up the rest of the face with the white hair, we can always nip back in and build the contrasting areas up, just so that you're building up the whole painting a little bit at a time, a little bit on the whiter area, a little bit on the darker area, and it just balances then. If I was to concentrate on just one area and take it from beginning to end, you've not got as much control over creating a whole painting to look whole, as it were. I prefer to build up my painting gradually throughout the painting. So this part will get worked on again, especially around the edges as the white hairs come into play. Because obviously none of those have been added yet. So a few highlights going in using the grey. And that is a warm grey, not a cool grey. Just patting it down, just softening the effect. And just while our eyes are upon that eye patch, hope you can notice that I have added a highlight around the bottom eyelid. And it's not so clear on the reference image that I was working from, but I do like to add eyelid highlights and even little water droplets to the eyelids sometimes, watermarks. Just makes the animal look more realistic. Now continuity of colour again running through this, so we're going to be using some of the colours from other areas on the panda into the nose, even if they're not there on the reference image. It's just to create a little bit of continuity. So the same warm grey, and this is a Conti pencil, and this pencil set actually was bought for me by my dad. My dad passed away in 2001, but he bought me these pencils way back when I was 14, and I'm 52 in September. So yeah, so some of them are like little tiny stubs now, and I won't use them ever again because I want to save what's left of them. Some of them, like this one, is a fair decent amount of pencil left, so I'll use them for a while longer. But they're glorious pencils, they really are, but obviously sentimental value, so I'm slightly biased as well. This is a Carbothello. This is the brand that I do teach with. I do run workshops here in the UK, in Leicestershire and Cheshire, and all the details of those are available on my website, www.kerrynewell.com. And I've recently been asked to set up a catalogue of art events here in Cheshire at Knowsley Safari Park. So I ran my first workshop there last Saturday, which was quite funny because of my shoulder issue at the minute. I had to work sitting down with my work flat, and people are that used to seeing me work upright and easily, it was quite comical. But the day went really well, and now we're planning some future dates and hopefully the setting up of an art group to run constantly over there as well, so I'm really looking forward to being involved with all of that. But more news on that, and if you'd like to go over to my website and sign up to my newsletter, you'll get to know all the ins and outs and of what I'm doing exhibiting and teaching wise. I also teach privately as well, private tuition, workshops, demonstrations and all different things. But anyway, that's for another day. So back to the nose, so back in with this warm grey. Now, even if you've got a very limited palette, and I'm not using an awful lot of pencils here, it's only sort of 5 pencils I've used so far, apart from the pinks in the eye. Even with a limited palette, sort of 12 pencils, and you can produce a vast amount of colours and hues and tones just by mixing them on the paper. So if you have got limited supplies, don't let it stop you creating artwork. If you've got nothing at all, just buy some pencils, some graphite pencils, and just get creating. If you want to create, don't let anything stop you. Don't let anything get in your way. Supplies don't have to be expensive. And graphite's very cheap, you know, and just a normal pack of drawing pencils you could get for sort of £4, £3, £4. You don't have to go really expensive. Just get out there and get sketching if that's all you can do. And then add to your art materials as you go along. Birthdays, Christmases, treat yourself if you've achieved something that you didn't think you were going to achieve, whatever that may be. Everybody's gone mad on these Fitbits, haven't they? And they're doing their 10,000 steps. So maybe if you reach a certain goal doing something like that, treat yourself to some art materials. Okay, going in with the black. This is the lamp black. This is the black that's got quite a bit of blue in it. So it's got quite cool going around there. So it works quite well using the lamp black to make the skin areas look quite cool. And obviously the nose isn't covered by fur, so the lamp black is working well on the nose. And then you can work with the normal black, the jet black, over other colours and under different glazes and highlights to create a warmer feeling in the areas where the fur is black. Just taking my time. I've got my eye on the reference image to my left, just making sure this is all going on how I'd planned it to go on. A little bit of shading running down that area. And if any bits of pastel drop off, because I'm working in an upright position, just gently blow and they just come off. They don't stay there. They don't stick to the pastel paper at all. I don't use any fixative on my pastel paintings. I think I've used fixative twice, and that's just when paintings have been shipped abroad. I've ended up using them just on 2 paintings that actually went over to Geneva. The owners of Caran bought 2 originals to hang in the headquarters in Geneva, and I did spray those. Other works that have gone abroad have never needed it, but I just did spray those too. I can't remember why now. There must have been a reason at the time. If I'm selling any artworks in the UK, If it's commissioned or if it's purchased gallery works, then I do hand deliver them, because I think that's part of the service. Whether it's Scotland to Cornwall, you know, it's just nice to actually give that little bit extra, go that extra mile, or 100. But yeah, it's just for customer satisfaction. I think just nice to know, and for me to know that the painting's there safe with them. Obviously, if it's going abroad, then I have a shipping crate made. The gentleman that does my framing, scanning and printing, he also makes my shipping crates. So they're made for any works that get sold that have to go abroad. Yeah, if you are having work shipped abroad, make sure your shipping container is easily accessed from the top, because sometimes your paintings will get stopped at customs and they'll want to have a look inside. So if you could make the top of your shipping crate easily accessible, it makes it easier all round, and it's less likely that your paintings are going to get damaged if they're being inspected, or if the insides of the shipping crates are being inspected. Just toning down that highlight just a little bit. And this is a sepia pencil, feathering around the edges there, where the hair would be growing away from the bottom of the nose. Just don't want too much of a harsh line running along there. And back in with the sepia again, and then back in with black, just to darken that shadowed area just a little bit more. And with the white, this is the Carbothello white again. Popping the highlights in and softening them down with my finger. I'm assuming I'm looking at the reference image at this point. Back in with the soft tool and the pan pastel in a darker grey. A little bit of a shadowed area around there. And this is when it pays to have your reference image, whether it be a printed one or on screen, as close to you as possible really, just so you can have a quick glance, see where you need to be adding colour. Does it need to go darker or lighter? I mean, obviously along here, along the mouth, it's going to go a lot darker. But I didn't want to jump into a dark colour straight away and have it too dark. It's always easier to go darker than it is to go lighter. Now by adding a little bit of a darker colour, a darker grey, it's not going too dark because of the underlying lighter grey that's already been added. You can keep adding layers and building up your colour, because these layers are going on very light because they're being applied with the soft tool, and it's the pan pastel. So there's a lot of pigment in a very thin layer, which is ideal for the Clairefontaine pastel mat, and also for the Mine Taints paper and the sanded paper, something along the lines of Fisher 400. Whereas the vella paper, with it having a texture like velvet, will easily handle thicker layers that when applied with the pastel sticks. In with the pink. As with the eye, this pink is one of the pinks that's been used in the background. So we're keeping that continuity of colour running through the painting. Now, because I've done this voiceover recording sort of 5 times, I don't know if I'm repeating myself now, so you'll have to bear with me if I do repeat anything. It's because I've already filmed this, recorded this so many times now, and I'm forgetting what I've said on this one and what I've said on the others. Hopefully this won't happen again. But whenever I'm working as subject, I do like to include aspects of background and foreground colours in my subject. So if I was working on a jaguar in a forested area, in a jungled area, I'd like to include some of the greens of the foliage in the reflections of his eyes, and some of the highlights of his fur could contain some of the greens or some of the yellow hues from the greens. And if working, say, a giraffe with a nice bright blue sky, obviously a giraffe having oranges in its coat, oranges and browns in its coat, it's going to be very complementary with a blue sky anyway, so that would look nice. But then also using some of the blue from the sky in the highlights of the giraffe's eyes would work. And some of the shadowed area on the giraffe, you could also use some of the blues as well to make the shadows look cool. So that way, by just pulling some of the colours out of a foreground or background or both into the subject, just pulls the whole painting together. It makes it look as though the different aspects of the painting belong together and they weren't just stuck one on top of another like superimposed. You don't want a superimposed look unless you're going along the illustrative or cartoon style art. Okay, now this Carbothello pencil I always want to call cream, but it's classed as ivory. So this ivory pencil, just working a base coat for the teeth. I never use white on its own. If white will be added later, that will just be for little highlights on the teeth where the light source is hitting the teeth. But apart from that, I like to use different colours. And obviously the colour of teeth can depend upon the species itself and its diet, and obviously the surroundings, as we said about reflections and things. The teeth will be reflecting the pink from the tongue and the gums, as well as the darker colours from the shadowed areas. So all of that, keep in mind that teeth aren't normally just little white stumps, as they look like little pillars of salt and they just don't look very realistic. So that's something to keep in mind. We were talking about ugly stages earlier on, weren't we? And the mouth definitely looks like it's at the ugly stage at the moment, but I know it's not finished, so you just carry on plodding on, and that's why it's nice to have a part of the painting that is finished, i.e. the eye. It gives you something to look at and think, oh yeah, I'll persevere with this one, you know. So when things look ugly elsewhere, there's always something nice to look at if part of a painting's finished or near to completion. Again, I was using the red oxide there that we've used on the eye and under the darker patches of fur on the panda, just in that little shadowed area in the mouth. Little makeup applicating tool just to soften the colours down. You see, you can use anything when you're working in pastels. Don't always have to use things that are just made for work with pastels. Just try different things out, see what works for you. Still working the colours down a little bit more. Adding those highlights that we were talking about. And try not to overdo it as well, because the highlights, they don't want to be like too bright. Doesn't want to look like he's had his teeth bleached. I still want it to look natural. And again, a pink that was used in the background area. And used for some of the shadowing as well. It's quite self-explanatory, isn't it, when you're watching it? Just tidying up around that tooth. Like we said earlier, it's easy to lose your guidelines. Obviously, with all the guidelines in this area of the mouth have now all been covered. Now you've just got to be careful when you're working in a smaller area such as this. that things aren't made too narrow or too wide. It would be easier to press in with the darks on either side of that tooth and the tooth become too narrow. So again, just keep in mind where the original guidelines are when working on something like this. Obviously all of these techniques and ideas you can utilise in your own work, whether you're working on a dog or a cat or kangaroo. It all applies. It works across the whole animal kingdom, birds and reptiles and amphibians. As I said, if there's any subjects or mediums you'd like me to cover in future videos, just leave a message in the comments below and I'll put them on my to-do list. But a couple of people have asked for eyes, and that's why the next video is going to concentrate on leopard eyes. And obviously all the fur around it. It's going to be a full face, but we will be zooming in into the eyes and I might slow the eyes down to normal time instead of having them sped up. And hopefully I'd have figured out how to do the voiceovers a little bit better on the next lot of videos, where I don't have to record the same thing 5 times. Just pause in there. I'm assuming I'm looking at the reference image. If you hear any weird noises, my dog's just woke up and she's now stretching and shaking herself. And we're working just some black hair, just going down. It's actually just in that shadowed area, so it could be part of the jowl, the inner gums, all mixed together because it's all in shadow down that area. So I'm not going to be too fussy about trying to put any detail in that, because there's actually no detail in that part of the reference image that I've got. And back in with the soft tool. Now I'm not applying green. The green on there is just a stain on the foam from when I was working on the bouquet background video in green. That's just where the foam is stained, so none of that green would have been coming off on the painting. It's quite clean, all worked off on a piece of tissue, all the loose green was. Now applying some white hairs coming away from the lip area and tidying up along the bottom of the chin. And notice how I didn't put a straight line running from left to right, but actually feathering up and down just to create a soft effect across there. You don't want to just one line because it would look odd. Just softening that back down with the soft tool with the foam tip. As I said, these foam tips, they come in different sizes and shapes, so some are pointed, some are rounded. You can get square shaped ones, and they're really useful, and they save having to stick your fingers into your pastel every 5 minutes, because obviously you're going to get the oils from your hands then on your work, which isn't a good thing. If you are going to work in pastels and you do like using your fingers to blend, then I do suggest that you wash your hands before you start working, but don't apply any moisturiser or hand cream or anything. I mean, by all means do that after you've finished work, but not before you start your work, because you don't want to get any artificial moisturisers or oils onto your work. It's bad enough just getting your own hand oils on, so yeah, just keep that in mind when you're working with pastels or any art mediums for that matter. And on with a little bit more white. Just keeping that going on quite steadily. Little random hairs. Making sure they're going in the right direction. Always looking at the reference image. And if you want something to look realistic, then I do suggest you do work either from life or from a reference image. Don't try and draw things out of your mind, because 9 times out of 10 it won't look how you think it looks. So you'll think hair falls in a certain direction on a certain part of an animal's face, when in actual fact sometimes it could take you by surprise and suddenly spiral off in another direction when you least expect it. Few more random hairs going along there, and can you see the white, this white, the Carbothello white, covers the dark colours up so well, so easily. It's a pleasure to work with. Going on with the black and letting the black fall in between some of these white lines. I'm not deliberately filling in every gap though. I'm not looking for gaps to fill in. I'm just randomly letting the black fall down in between some of the white hairs. And it's this randomness about the strokes that will make it look more realistic. I think when you try and do something deliberately, it always looks false, but this random style of working, relaxed style of working, just adds to the viability of the piece. Letting the black glaze some of those hairs as it goes down. Okay, and as you can see there, I've tinted and glazed quite a lot of that hair now, darkening it a tiny bit more. And you might think, well, what's the point of putting all that white on then darkening it? Well, if you're up close next to this, you can actually see all of that white and work underneath, and it is literally just glazed, so you can still see it, it just looks shadowed, but the highlights will go on top of that in a moment. Just padding that down very, very gently, not rubbing any of the work away, just softening its effect. Going on with the black, just tidying up that chin area where it had got a little bit fuzzy. So just tidying that up a bit. Very easy, very quick. Not wanting to dwell on this area for too long in the creative process. And now going in with the grey, it's the soft warm grey again that we used in the nose and for the highlights under the eye. Back in with the black. Back in with the grey. That's what happens when you keep looking at the reference image. You might think you're going to do something one time and then you look back and decide something else, but that's great. Nothing's ever worked the same. Every two paintings are completely different. You might work colours in a different order. If I was to do another panda on another day, I might use a completely different set of colours, because it all depends what colour light the panda would be sitting under or walking under or whatever. So lighting changes colours. Weather conditions in which the panda was sitting would change the colours you'd use, all different things like that. So different techniques for different paintings, and that's what makes it so enjoyable as well. Every day is different, even if you're working on the same subjects, each painting's different. I just say now that the board is rattling about a bit. It's a big Italian brand easel, but I do seem to be wobbling a little bit. So on this video editing suite there is an image stabilizing function, and I'll have a play around at using that for the next video, just so you don't see so much video wobble. And looking at this, it would be nice if I could work that quick in real time. But I still enjoy the process, even if it takes a little bit longer. Well, thank you for if you've made it this far. We're sort of 54 minutes or so into the video, so we've just got just over half an hour to go. I like listening to videos in the background, so I don't know if that's something that you like to do too. So if you do, this would be perfect, me just rambling on for an hour and a half, I guess. If you belong to any art groups in the UK, then you can always pass my details on to the art group or art society's secretary, because I do demonstrate up and down the country if that's something your art company would be interested in. That's something I can do, and details can be forwarded to you if you email me, and my email address and everything can be found on my website if that's something that you're interested in, or private tuition, while I still have some time left to me for that at the moment, because obviously I'm wanting to build up a lot more work over at Knowsley Safari Park now that it's an opportunity that's too good to be missed. So okay, back on with the white, building up some highlights now. See how easily that white is going over the darker areas, and the idea now isn't to cover up all of the dark work that we've just done, but to let that dark be visible in between the lighter strokes of the pencil to give you added depth. Now, one thing I must say is when you're working over a darker area with a lighter pigment, just be aware that the lighter pigment, i.e. the white pencil here, will be picking up some of the darker pigment from underneath, so you do need to keep wiping it clean, else it'll just transfer the darker pigment to where you don't want it to be, and you'll just end up with a bit of a muddy mess. So just keep that nice and clean as you're working with it. Back in with the black. And in with this medium grey. This is the warm grey again that we're using throughout the painting so far. And just tidying that little bit of area up underneath his chin, and obviously it would be a bit darker than everywhere else because it's going to be in shade. And feathering down onto the black body area of the panda as well, because obviously you don't want the hair from the head just to stop in a straight line. It might look similar to that on the reference image, but then a photo is always going to look real for the simple fact it is a photo. But some things you do have to use a little bit of artistic license for when you're creating a painting, because what might look right on a reference image may not look correct on a painting. So I didn't want it to look like the head had been super glued onto a body, hence the feathering of the fur coming down through the grades of grey, like I'm doing there. Just having another drink. Back in with a trusty white again. A little bit more detail there. That's a softer white. That's the Caran dash now. Ideal for highlights. It's very, very soft pastel pencil. The Caran dash are soft but very, very strong. So I call them the Andrex of the pastel world. Back in with a white. And just moving forward a little bit now. And you can see that we've gone round the upper lip with the white, and all I'm doing now, I'm leaning on my mole stick and applying the Carbothello white pastel pencil. And this is where we need to be looking at the reference image. We need to know, there's three things to remember really when you're creating hair like this: direction, length and width. You need to know that the direction in which the hairs are falling is correct, the length of the hairs need to be correct, and obviously the width, because the hair's going to alter slightly across the subject depending on what area of the subject you're working on. So some areas of the face the hair might be very fine and short, where in other parts of the head the hairs are likely to be thicker and longer, and sometimes run in different directions too. So I obviously decided that I needed the tonal base coat just to go a little bit darker there. I've decided to put that a little bit more in shadow down the side. So I've added a little bit more of the soft pan pastel to that area with a soft tool. And then back on with the white pastel pencil. Again, leaning on the mole stick, which should save my shoulder, but obviously didn't 2 weeks ago. Just building this up now, a little bit of time, and it looks very tedious, I guess, to people who like things to happen really quickly, but I find it very relaxing. And when I'm working on fur like this, because I've done it for so long, I am often at this point thinking about my next project. Maybe I've got one sketched out and ready to go onto the easel for colour to be added. Maybe I've been looking through some reference images recently and I've got in mind what my next couple of projects are likely to be. Things like that I'd be thinking about now, as opposed to applying the actual fur, because I do find it very, very easy now that I've done it so many years. And I do, because I'm self-taught, I do tend to work my other mediums more or less in the same way. So my oils and acrylics and even watercolours. I work my watercolours quite dry, so I like doing fine artworks with my watercolour as opposed to washes. And coloured pencil, I do, obviously that's worked light to dark as opposed dark to light, as you'll see here, but still very much the same sort of styles and techniques I utilise in all my mediums and all my works. But still saying that, as I said, no two paintings are ever worked exactly the same. And some techniques I work on some subjects I know just wouldn't work on others, so I don't attempt them. Sometimes I'll attempt a technique I've worked before and it just doesn't work, and there's no sort of reason or rhyme as to why. So it's a learning curve, and that's what I love about art. It's just, you never stop learning, and hopefully those of us are never stop learning, never stop sharing either, because that's all part and parcel of being here. We're only here once, aren't we? And so it's just nice to share our techniques and fill the world with beautiful things. So building up some more detail along there. That's where the light source is going to be hitting the panda's face the most, is across the top of its muzzle. And now the hair direction changes, and so we need to follow that. Don't take it for granted that you know how the hairs on an animal's face fall. Don't try and make it up as you go along. Always have reference images to work from. And people often say to me that they wouldn't be able to create a detailed work of art because they can't get a good reference image. Well, what I say is, if you can go to a zoo, a safari park, or go on holiday abroad somewhere where the subjects are that you like, as long as you get a photograph with a good pose, that's the main thing. The pose is the main thing. The detail you can always get from other reference images, obviously copyright free reference images, but as long as you've got a good pose you can always build on that. Getting the right pose is the main thing. Okay, so the reason I haven't concentrated on the top of the head is it was just more of the same. It was following the direction of the hairs on the reference image, applying them to the head itself, going up the forehead onto the top of the head. I then applied a glaze of yellow ochre to the top of the head, and then popped some more little highlights with white on top of that. The reason I added the yellow ochre on top is to stop his head looking like a golf ball, because on the photograph it was just round. There wasn't any shadowing up there and no colour up there at all. It's another case of artistic license. I didn't feel that would be the correct procedure to carry out for a painting. I believed a little bit of colour wouldn't go amiss up there. Now, having said that, if you do apply a colour that you didn't mean to, say I'd picked up a burgundy instead of the yellow ochre, just by mistake. Just bear with me, I'm going somewhere with this point. If I was to pick up a colour and use it and it wasn't the colour I thought it was, don't just stop there. If you've added, say, a patch of burgundy when you didn't mean to, don't try and leave it just at that one patch of burgundy and try and cover it up. The best thing to do would be to use that same colour, even though it wasn't the colour you originally intended to use, and apply it elsewhere through the painting, not in large amounts but in subtle amounts. That way, when you do go back over your burgundy areas, instead of covering up completely, you can actually utilize them make them part of your painting by making the most of them, and in that way it will look like they're meant to be there, and it wasn't that one of them was actually an accident. And I've had some really good happy accidents that way, I must admit, where I've used a colour I didn't want to use but then found I could use it to my advantage, and it bring about an even better result in a completed painting. So that's one thing to do. I'm just building up more of the same. The hair underneath this ear, some of the hair is actually facing the viewer, so tiny little dots and dashes are enough to create a feeling of depth in that area, where you can only see the very tips of the hairs because some of them are pointing towards you. Sorry about my hair getting in frame there. Photo bombing the frame. Back down this side of the face. More of the same. Now I'm assuming you can understand why I did the base coat colours the way I did, with the greys and the flesh tones underneath, because they are actually showing through the white hair now as we're building it up. And this is exactly the same techniques that I'm going to be using in a workshop I'm running in, when is it, November. I'm running a polar bear workshop in Leicestershire in November. I'm running a Ural owl workshop in Leicestershire in August. But these techniques will be more so for the polar bear, obviously with the polar bear's colouring, but he'll still have the tonal base coat built up the same as this one, with the greys and probably some blues and flesh tones underneath before the white's added on top. The Ural owl is, for those of you who don't know what a Ural owl is, they're predominantly greys as well, so he'll have the same base coat colours underneath as well. Oh, losing my voice. Hooray, shouts everybody. So a little bit of glazing up there, again with the yellow ochre. This is the same yellow ochre that I used on the top of the bear's head. I've also implemented some of that around the mouth and just above his eyebrow, or where his eyebrow would be. Now in with the warm grey, and you know we've now used this warm grey throughout the painting. It was used up for the highlights around the eye, it was used on the muzzle, it was used on the lips around the mouth, it was used on the nose, the shadowed area under the jaw and along the jawline. So it's been used throughout the head, and you just keep using the same colours throughout just to keep that unity. I'm just glazing on and in between some of those white hairs just to create a little bit of depth, so it doesn't look like a solid mass, else it'd either resemble a golf ball or a cotton wool ball, and neither of those would do this panda any justice. So just working in a little bit of grey there. And moving on. So now we're back on with the ivory that looks like cream, but it's classed as ivory. Working an undercoating. So this is a softer hairs underneath the guard hairs on the panda's head we're working in now. Just filling it in as we go along. And you'll see on the finished painting right at the end, a lot of white hair was added over the top of this, in clumps and in little sections, just where some of the hair had become matted. And obviously how you approach drawing hair depends on the subject itself. As I said, lions' manes will have long frizzy hair. Poodles, for instance, have got very curly hair. Some hair, like lemur, the hair on lemurs, that's quite fuzzy. So all different subjects would be approached slightly differently, but all have the basic needs of how I work them, and that's creating the base coats underneath with the soft pastels and then applying the detail on top. On with a little bit of white. Obviously we want to be feathering that edge down over the black again so it doesn't look like the head's sitting on top. And I think you'll be thankful to know there's about 10-12 minutes left of this video. Working gently down there now, just pulling it all together. Very gently working over with the white, working over the base coats, but not covering all of the base coats up. Just blending that edge a little bit and actually lifting the black into it just a little bit. Probably gone a little bit too low on that area there. Not that you'd notice, but because I'm looking at the reference image, then I've obviously just noticed something there that needed to be altered slightly. I'm assuming I'm looking at the reference image again there because of the pause, and then going back in with the black. That's better. I'm happy with it where it is, where the edges are, and now starting to let the black fall in between some of the hairs just to give a sense of depth. So I'm not deliberately looking for gaps to fill, as we said earlier, just going in and just randomly placing those marks in there. I must admit it's looking quite fluffy from what I can see on screen now, so he's nearly done. And tidying up that edge again. And people ask me, how do I know when something's finished? Well, for me it's when something doesn't jump out at me with something particularly wrong in view. So if I take a photograph of a piece on my phone or on my tablet, and then I look at the photograph, if something's not really obvious that's wrong, then I'll put the painting on my easel for a couple of days, go back in to the studio after a couple of days, have a look. If nothing's obvious, then it gets signed, and once it's signed, once I put my name on it, then I don't touch it again, and I'm ready to start on my next piece. Because obviously you've got to draw the lines somewhere else. You could go on and on, just adding more detail or altering colour, or you could just go on forever. But after the famous words of Leonardo da Vinci, he said, a painting's never finished and merely abandoned. Well, you can't get more correct than that, can you? So you've just got to call it quits at some point and move on to your next project. Now, I do encourage people to keep a notepad, and especially if you're a beginner, and take photographs of your work as you go along, so you can look back over previous work and see where you've improved. And also by keeping a notepad, you can write down things that worked well for you and maybe things that didn't work so well. So you could write down when a certain technique works well for you in a given situation and where it doesn't, so you could make note of that. Also, if you're mixing colours, what colour mixes worked for you and what colour mixes didn't, and then maybe a little page in your notepad for each painting you completed. You could critique it yourself, give yourself a pat on the back for anything that you've achieved that's been new to you and that's done really well, and then also maybe critique if you were to do the same painting again, what would you alter? Not necessarily about the way it looks even, but about the techniques you used. And you could also make notes about things like you expected it to take a certain amount of hours and it took less or more, and that's a learning curve as well, because we sometimes think things are going to be quite quick, but when we start on them we realise that's not to be, and or sometimes vice versa, we think something's going to take a long time, and when in actual fact it didn't take as long as we thought it would. So things like that. Write down notes about anything and everything. Where you got your first inspiration from for a certain painting or drawing. What products you like, what makes of product you like, and what you don't as well, so that you know for next time when you're working on a new project. Okay, using that red oxide again, that's the same red oxide that was used on the eye and in the mouth. We're just putting a little bit around the coat, and also that red oxide is from the orange in the background as well. Just making sure we've got enough shape to the panda's head as he nears completion. Adding a little bit of colour under the eye and pull it all together. And round the mouth. Again, I'm not trying to rub anything away, just softening it down. That's okay to do it like that, just a little bit at a time. A little bit of shading with that warm grey that we've used throughout the painting. And I'm not applying green, I'm applying just a little bit of soft grey, a bit of light, medium to light grey going under there with a soft tool. That's out of one of the panpastels. Just building up the layer as we're going down and patting it again. So nearly there, nearly finished. A little bit of soft work using the black, like we were doing further down the facial hair. We're just going in between some of the lighter hairs, but we're not looking to go in between all of them because it would look far too regimented then. Just randomly placing some lines along there and feathering the edges of the hairs as they fall down the side, because obviously they're changing direction again here. As you can see, some of them are almost vertical now as opposed to horizontal. Starting to add some more highlights now. These highlights, when you see the finished piece, will have been continued up the side of the face, but not covering all the work we've done, but just some of the guard hairs are white, overlapping the softer undercoats of the panda. Working around the head a little bit more. That's a Caran dash, white, very, very soft. As you can see, it's going on very easily. I'm not pressing at all, just letting the paper pick up the pigment as I'm working. I'm wiping off the darker pigments from the pencil and turning the pencil continuously in my hand as I work as well, just to retain the point for longer. A little bit more, picking out a few more details along there. And now it's not necessarily a case of looking at the reference image now, but just looking at what I think is going to make this painting look right for me personally, because everything's in the right place, all the hair's going in the right direction, the hair length's correct, and now it's just a case of where do I think the light source would be hitting the fur? Where could I put some highlights? And there you have him. Highlights are all in, running down the right hand side of the face. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this long haul video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have, thank you very much. Please don't hit the subscribe button again, because that means you'll unsubscribe and I'll be very sad. Join me on social media. I'm over on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram, and I look forward to seeing you all soon for my next video. Thank you for now. Thanks. Bye bye.